Hey everybody, it's another HBCU conversation, and boy, the conversations continue to evolve week by week when it comes to football. In the CIAA and the SIAC, there will be none of this for the fall. Or will there in some cases? Let's talk about it. Joining us, our very own Vaughn Wilson down from Tallahassee, Florida right now, where he got to check out that Black Lives Matter mural painted between Florida State and FAMU. And joining us from Houston, Texas, Dr. Kenyatta, Cavil. Guys, I'm just going to start here. Were you surprised when you heard yesterday, Thursday night, that the CIAA and the SIAC both agreed that there will be no fall sports this fall, with football, of course, being the main attraction?
Well, I'll just say I think it's the responsible decision at this point. There's no headway being made on COVID-19. As a matter of fact, here in Florida, where I am, they're setting record numbers every day, and it's disappointing that some of the politicians in some venues are ignoring the actual numbers, the scientific data. But if you're talking about football, if you're talking about worse than football, basketball is even worse than football. There is some separation in football, but in basketball, I mean, it's body on body. You could have all 10 guys there in a 5 square foot area. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So fall sports, even the cross countries, they pack up in cross country. So from all of the data that we have about COVID-19, it is not safe to put student athletes at risk for the sake of these colleges and athletic programs.
So unfortunately, here in Houston, Texas, and Texas in general, like you said about Florida, it seems like we're in this ugly race to the top in the wrong direction. So I can certainly relate to what is going on with Florida and the disposition of a lot of political pundits are looking at this instead of maybe from a more medical perspective. But with that said, to answer your question directly, Tali, in regards to, I was not necessarily surprised from the SIAC standpoint, because we had heard some reports that came out in different frameworks. I think BCSC and AD put some information out there that may have gave us some framing of that. And then Stephen Gaither did a report on that to further provide some context. But I was surprised in regards to what seemed almost like a joint type of statement between the SIAC and the CIAA in regards to the timing. And so that did surprise me a little bit. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And there was synergy between the two in regarding them kind of having each other's back, if you would, in regards to making that decision. So in one way, no, I was not surprised. In the other way, I was surprised.
I'm glad it wasn't just me, because when I saw that, I was like, well, wait, what is this? And it surprised me because the CIAA's release came out a few minutes earlier than the SIAC, and they were kind of tacked on the back end of the CIAA announcement. And then I saw the SIAC announcement, so I was a little confused at first as well. But yeah, they're sticking together there on the Division II side. We have heard from Miles College, though, who said they're still opening up the possibility or keeping hope alive that their student athletes can play this fall. They would have to operate as an independent. They'd have a lot of holes to fill in that schedule unless some other SIAC schools decide to go that independent route. I know Tuskegee was a big question. They put out a release that coincided with what the SIAC said, and it looks like they're going to stick to no sports this fall. Would the juice be worth the squeeze, Doc, to try to fill all those holes and still play football this fall, even when your conference is not sponsoring the sport coming up this season?
I would like to add one context as I answer that question, is the fact that it's my understanding that we've heard about the CDC and the legislative money coming out of Congress in regards to moving forward with trying to fight COVID-19. And a lot of that money was specifically going towards institutions, higher education institutions, if you would. And with further research, it is my understanding that the state of Alabama has coalesced that resources and have looked at providing it to the institution such that students overall can come back, which would include college athletes. And so that may provide some reason why Miles College, and at one time, even Tuskegee were considering that, although it looks like Tuskegee is went on a different divergent in regards to following the lead that the presidents made based on the recommendations that came from the ADs and coaches before this week. And so Miles is looking like they're looking at going independent for at least a year and seeing can they have a season. From my perspective, I think as more information comes in, as Vaughn talked about in the state of Florida, what we see in the state of Texas, even further west when we go to Arizona and California now, and to some degree, even Alabama and Mississippi, as there are upticks in all these states, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, do we have to name them all? Moving up in the wrong direction, I think it is going to be impossible, but you just see the SIAC and CIAA as a conference getting ahead of it.
And also, yeah, you got to know that the SIAC and the CIAA had conversed. It's not a coincidence that minutes apart they come out with similar statements. So we're not there. But one of the bigger issues, I like how Paul Feinbaum said it. Give us one reason why we should try to play college football this year. I mean, all of the information that we have on the fateful day that our president made his statements about ingesting disinfectant. Right before him was a very brilliant man, and it's so sad that he got his words got lost in the context. He had the best information probably to date that I had heard about how to handle the coronavirus. And one thing he said is that heat was an enemy of the coronavirus. So let's think about fall sports. So if we're having record numbers now, as hot as it is, on the fields like here in Tallahassee, it's 102 today. And the coronavirus is still multiplying. What's going to happen when it cools off in the fall, later on in the seasons? We have no idea because we don't even know how to handle what's going on now. So for the safety of all of these people's children, which is at the bottom line, who have come to school to get an education, yes, to play, but they didn't come there to get inflicted with COVID-19.
Let's not mince words here. There's a lack of leadership in our country. There is dangerous leadership in our country. When you have people in charge more concerned about their own well-being, their own re-election, their own access to power and wealth, than humanity. And argue me on that case if you'd like. But with that being said, it's almost like a free fall. You got one state doing this, you got another state doing that, and some people are making it political. I don't see how a national sport like football, where people can't even agree on a simple thing as can we wear a mask to protect ourselves and to protect others, I don't know how it's going to work.
I don't think you're going to get any argument about that leadership piece. I don't think Dr. Cavil or I will argue with you about that. But the bottom line is decisions just like you're talking about are being made here in Florida. Our governor, Ron DeSantis, on yesterday demanded that K through 12 open up in 4 weeks. Elementary school kids, up middle school kids, high school kids. Well, what's to protect them from these escalating numbers? What's to protect the teachers? What's to protect the administrators? What's to protect everyone from each other because there are so many unknowns with COVID-19? It's interesting that we're having this conversation, but we shouldn't be having this conversation because it's more than a game now. I mean, industries like ours, like our HBCU game day, what are we going to do if there are no fall sports? We all have to deal with that. It's a harsh reality. But to put kids out in harm's way to maintain the way of life we want, it's not a good option.
We'll have plenty of things to talk about. I can pick Doc's brain, if I can get that right, all fall long. And let me start here, Doc. We heard the CIAA today during their press conference talk about, the economics of football is not going to hurt them like it will a Power 5 because most of their budget comes from student fees. They're not looking for football to turn $1 and support every other program. A lot of that has just been off of the backs of the students and what they pay in tuition in that fee section. But the SWAC, the MEAC, we've seen all of these big classics, postponed, moved to different venues, canceled outright. What's next for the MEAC and the SWAC and Tennessee State? They've lost their first three games already. Do you see a path forward where there's any way that in the end they're going to end up playing games this fall?
I think it's a very difficult path for them moving forward. I've already got information that the SWAC presidents at least have met this week. My understanding that the MEAC presidents are meeting as well. And when I say presidents, it's presidents and chancellors respectively at the conference level. And one of the decisions that came out of that is they're trying to get more time because their season starts a little later than what you've seen at the Division II level and NAIA for that matter. And so instead of bringing people back around the timeline they were talking about July 15th area of time, they pushed that to July 25th. So that's kind of our next demarcation. But that was really before we started hearing about the CIAA SIAC, which we know is at the NCAA Division II level. But we also now have seen what took place in the Ivy League at the FCS level, which has a similar framework of how they deal with the sport of football. They don't participate in the FCS. Now, obviously, the SWAC does not either, neither does the MEAC, but they play in the bowl game. So that's something to consider that is similar, but therefore also different. Then this is also on the heels that the Big Ten made a statement in regards to only playing conference games, and they're looking at playing 10 conference games. We understand that the Pac-12 is going to be making a decision in the near future. We hear information with the ACC looking at changing their framework. So I put all that in the factor that one thing that we have to consider with the MEAC and the SWAC is they have these money games that we like to refer to them where they play Power 5 institutions or FBS institutions. And one thing that I believe is on the table is that they want to be careful in regards to making a decision first as they look at the safety of college students, but also being careful not to break contracts. And therefore, their decision may germinate in regards to what the FBS level is doing, not in regards to their final decision or not to play, but in terms of when they make that decision is something for us to really consider.
Very good point. Let me follow that up with two questions. Is there insurance, riders, waivers, anything like that on these guaranteed game money opportunities and games that are on the schedule? And if so, does that make it vitally important that HBCUs might want to wait until the Power 5, Group of 5 schools be the one to break that contract and not them?
That's an important contextual question. So these contracts for the Power 5 schools, they oftentimes do have insurance claims, not necessarily for the FCS team, HBCU, or any other that sign those contracts. But oftentimes, as you would imagine, there's clauses within the contracts that kick in that suggest that if you get out of the contracts, that you can owe some things financially. So that's the reason that you have to be very considerate about that. Now, obviously, some of these insurance riders, if you would, do have different things in there, such as acts of God. But oftentimes that would be in question as we starting to see this insurance versus athletic departments on all levels of what does that mean. And so sometimes a court will actually have to make that decision on the language of the contract in terms of how it is enforced. And so absolutely, those are things that need to be considered as we push those out. And there's some questions one way or the other in regards to this fine line of how they will be measured. Oftentimes that decision, as I said, will go into the court. Financially, as you look at, as the first part of your question in regards to that, that there is a revenue distribution that obviously people look at that they're missing, but oftentimes we don't take into account the expense line, as you talked about in regards to them not having to pay for the hotel costs, not having to pay for travel expenses, meals, which we all talk about in terms of lodging. So those expenses are not being made. So there's some difference in terms of just how much revenue will be lost when you really look at the profit loss statement in regards to the financial component of the decision.
Well, Vaughn, I'll tell you this, man, if it goes to court, I'm going to make the argument that the Rona is of the devil and not an act of God.
Well, and they've also got another problem going on, and these conferences realize that after that July 1st meeting where President Drake of Ohio State was dragged about, he thought he was coming to the Senate hearing to talk about the naming rights for college athletes. They quickly shifted to coronavirus preparation for playing football. And the senators were all over them. As a matter of fact, Senator Cory Booker and another who I can't name right now, I apologize, but they came with an amendment that would bypass these waivers that schools have had their athletes to sign. Particularly, the first one to emerge was SMU, that had these athletes basically to sign a no-fault clause in order to come back and play football, basically saying, okay, if you want to come back and play football, you can't sue us if you catch coronavirus, or you have to hold us harmless. Well, the Senate rebuked that in a major way. So the NCAA left there with their tails between their legs. So all of them have to be concerned that these decisions are not going to be made in a bubble, that the eyes of the world are on all of these conferences and the NCAA. So I'm just hoping that everyone makes the right decision. Hey, if you're able to put your athletes in a bubble and you've proven these colleges are research institutions. And if they've got good data of a way that football can be played safely, and they present it and execute it, and it turns out that nobody's affected, so be it. But I have not seen anything that closely resembles, even the NBA's bubble has room for error. So imagine 100 college students. It's just.
And you know what else, Vaughn? What I don't want to see next week, and I don't know that you can avoid it, you're going to have these MEAC and SWAC virtual press conferences, and these student athletes are going to be in front of a laptop or cell phone, and it's already going to be awkward, and everybody's going to ask them about the coronavirus and what they think, and are they safe, and how do they feel? And, they don't want to come across as being, afraid. They want to, be tough, like football players are. But, man, nobody can answer it. And they're going to have to be up there, dealing with these questions. And that's just, there's nothing fun about that at all.
It's interesting. In my last HBCU conversation, which should be coming up soon, I talked to Bethune-Cookman University coach Terry Sims. And I asked him, I said, what's the vision of your players? What are they actually saying, or what are they doing? And he said, they're ready to go. They want to get back on campus and get back to work, because this is the time of year where we're normally just full speed ahead. And so his thing was, but he has to temper that to what's safe for them. You've got young men who feel at that age they're invincible. Let's be honest. They're at the peak of health, probably, of their lives. They aren't afraid of anything. So it's going to take a serious story to convince them that it's not safe. And it's going to be very disappointing to those student athletes. What about those seniors who have to, they can't wait around another year. They have to go ahead and get a job to support their family. It's a a very dismal disposition to be in, but yet we're here.
Yeah, Doc, that's going to be a tough spot for those kids on these virtual platforms next week, because, I mean, can you really go into these media days saying, well, what type of offense you going to run this year? We can't even think about that, man.
No, that's very true. I mean, a lot of the questions are going to be around COVID-19 pandemic. How they? Another tough question that you're going to have to look at them asking is about what many people are now referring to as the other pandemic, racism, Black Lives Matter framing of that. And so they're going to have to be prepared to ask those questions. On the positive side, you're going to have questions in regards to the expansion of the SWAC. From their perspective in the SWAC, what does it mean for FAMU, Bethune-Cookman coming in? Now, that's the positive thing about it, but obviously they're trying to see if they can get through this season, because that doesn't start to 2021. So a lot of people are going to want those questions, but they're going to be wanting to focus on now. And the opposite of that is going to take place in the MEAC, where everybody's going to say, what about you losing not only Bethune-Cookman and FAMU, but as well as North Carolina A&T? So that's going to be an odd position for them to be in. And then there's going to be a lot of question on what moving forward, besides the first 2 or 3 questions that I said that they're going to have to answer. And they're all going to want to be focused on the ability of them playing their sport this season. But those are going to be some of the last questions that media people want to ask, and journalists, if you would, as I say, support them, right? Is the fact that's what people want to know. So those are what questions people are going to ask. And while it may not be as fair to them as we would want, it's real. And so you're right. That's going to be a huge challenge in regards to seeing that and watching that and their ability to navigate that space.
Yeah.
And I also think
a couple of questions for you guys before we get out of here today on HBCU Conversations. Thank you so much for hanging with us, and we appreciate the support, man. You guys have really been digging these, something about bringing Vaughn Wilson and Dr. Cavil on board. Our YouTube numbers have just magically just been going up and up. It pays to hang around smart people, I tell you what, because I was here just yakking around. Nobody, they ain't care, man. I'll start here. Vaughn, for you, man, the state of Florida. Look, I'm all about safety. I don't care about, missing a year of football, but to just talk about it and what it's going to mean for some of those kids. Edward Waters, man, they're building a new stadium. They're looking forward to being the only show in Jacksonville. They're trying to decide if they want to be in the SIAC and be a player in their exploratory phase. You got Florida Memorial making their big comeback. You had the Orange Blossom Classic coming back. It's now out. I mean, man, for Florida, and again, we're all about safety, but just to talk about the emotional impact, man, that's a big void for the whole state if it goes the way that we think it might go.
It really is. I mean, so many kids and alumni, if you look at social media, what about homecoming? It's just, there are so many things besides the games, the ancillary events. FAMU has an incredible homecoming convocation. I mean, it's just spirited, and it's where everybody comes back to gather. And of course, a giant tailgate before the games. So all of the social aspects that go around the games, we've got Perry Street, which is right behind our stadium, where it's totally lined with vendors for a half mile, where the best fish sandwiches hanging off the light bread with the hot sauce and the mustard, where you get the best sausage.
You're making me hungry, man.
Hey, I can smell it right now.
But those Fridays are made for fish sandwiches, man.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So the game's on Saturday, but Friday at noon, that vendor space is packed. That's part of the social atmosphere that you get with HBCUs. So this blow of what's going on in Florida, hey, it's nobody to blame it on, but it's a reality we have to deal with. And what you don't want is the biggest single place that people can identify where COVID spread was a funeral in Albany, Georgia. And this was before people understood how airborne COVID-19 was. And pretty much every single of those 30-something people that attended that funeral began to spread it immensely, because at one time, Albany, Georgia was the hotspot. And so knowing these factors, how do you put 100 kids in a locker room? How often do you test them? How accurate is it going to be if they're asymptomatic? There are just so many issues going on. While I love football and was so looking forward to seeing football in Bragg Stadium, to see a football in Camping World Stadium, to catch some other games at Albany State, to help cover SIAC games this year for HBCU Game Day. I just don't see a safe and way people can make a reasonable decision for us to have college football or basketball this year.
We got about 2 minutes left here. Doc, you said the smartest thing on this call that I hadn't even thought about. And let me make sure that I'm following your logic here. If we get to the point where all the Power 5 conferences have either said no football or conference only, and there are no more big paydays for HBCU, those guaranteed money games left, they've all been canceled. Do you think then at that point we might see some quick movement and decisions by the MEAC and the SWAC?
No doubt. I think they've already have different strategies and plans that calculate that in order. They're already having plans in case they look at a football only type of schedule. We know about the October 15th deadline that the commissioner, Dr. Charles McCullen, has put on the table. So yes, I think once those other factors come in place, along with the current state of COVID-19 in the various states that are the geographic footprint contiguously in the SWAC and or in the MEAC, it will give you some frameworks about them quickly making a decision. So yes, I think that is one of the first dominoes that we need to keep our eyes on. What is going to take place at the Power 5 level? And in addition, what is taking place at the FBS level simultaneously, based on what is taking place in the states directly related to COVID-19 tests, positive tests taking place, and the hospitalization rates that are taking place irrespectively in each of these states. Look for those things to kind of run strategically about what decisions will be made in the near future.
And I want to give you a chance for the final word here, Doc. Your show, Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, is so good every week. Enjoyed it this past week. You had Howard's athletic director up there. That was a great conversation. I learned a lot listening to that. How can people catch you and Inside the HBCU Sports Lab and the rest of your crew?
Thank you for that opportunity. They can come and catch us every Tuesday on Facebook Live, and that's 6 to 7 Central Standard Time. Watch out, though. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as I give updates, because sometimes we do a 2-hour special like you were talking about last week. We were able to do the week before when we had Charles. But generally, we start 6 to 7 Central Standard Time. That is Facebook Live. You can catch us as a podcast if you can't catch it live on the various podcasts that are out there. Spreaker is one of them. In regards to that, or you can just follow us at thgagency.com to get all the latest, greatest. And finally, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyatta, that's Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, and we'll give you the latest and greatest. And tune in right here, because I love making these special meetings when I get to talk even more intricately in terms of the business side of HBCU sports and beyond, especially when I'm joined with Vaughn Wilson under the tutelage of Polly Carr. Let's get it done.
I like that.
Oh boy, I don't even have my boots on, Doc. I'm doing this episode in my bedroom shoes. I'll wear my boots next time. And you can find all the great work that Vaughn Wilson does as well right here at HBCU Game Day. He does a great job keeping us up to date. Everything down south with FAMU. Great with the baseball coaches. Had that interview. We got an interview coming up with the Bethune-Cookman football staff as well. That's on the way. So Vaughn Wilson keeps us up to date on everything that's happening and popping in the state of Florida. All right, that's it for today's episode of Conversations. I'm Tolly Carr. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget that you can subscribe and keep up with all of our latest videos, our playlists, get notifications, all that. Take an opportunity right now to hit the button. There's one down there, and there's one over there, and one over there. Make sure you take the time to do that, all right? You guys enjoy the rest of your day, your weekend. We will talk to you later.